Welcome to another episode of A Chat with ESV Olalekan Aboderin. This is a publication of REST, otherwise known as Real Estate Services and Transactions. As we know, it's a subsidiary of Real Academy Limited. My name is Oluwafemi Samusi. In the house, of course, we have ESV Olalekan Aboderin. He is the lead advisor of Olalekan Aboderin Consulting, a firm of estate surveyors and valuers. He's also the Director of Studies of Real Academy Limited, a professional real estate development center here in Lagos, Nigeria. Once again, sir, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this episode.
Uncle Femi, it's my pleasure being here.
All right, so sir, for today we are going to discuss something very interesting: under co-ownership, buying properties under co-ownership. So, as an example, one example comes to mind: husband and wife buying a property under the co-ownership of husband and wife. So, I want to just first of all give a background to that.
Well, thank you. But if I may, can I ask you a question? Well, you have always been the one asking the question.
Please do, sir.
You said today we are going to discuss something interesting.
Yes, sir.
And I think that has always been the fact that anytime you open up our episode, you say we are discussing something interesting. Can you tell us when we will not discuss something? I really are sorry about that. Okay, yes, co-ownership. What co-ownership is a situation where more than one person collectively acquire a property under one title.
Okay.
We have discussed something like this in one of our past episodes concerning co-ownership. And co-ownership being different from strata title. In a co-ownership, if it is 1, 2, 3, no matter their numbers, they will be under one single title.
That's right.
All of them will be proprietor under one single title.
They have equal rights.
That is a case of co-ownership. Now, this case of co-ownership cannot take either of two forms. Either of the form of tenancy in common or joint tenancy. Where it is in the case of tenancy in common, it will be a situation where, for example, they hold this title together, the property together, as co-owner under one title. However, it's possible to decide or determine the portion or proportion of each one of them in the holding. Then that is tenancy in common. I repeat that, please. Let's say you have about, for the purpose of simplicity, let's say 4 friends. Coming together to acquire a parcel of land or a property, even if it's a developed property, under one title. With that, is a tenancy in common where even though all of them hold their rights under one single title, but it's possible to determine their portion, the respective portion or respective proportion for each one of them. That is tenancy in common. It's different from when it is a joint tenancy. For joint tenancy, there won't be any basis to determine the portion or the proportion. So because of that, we say there is unity of possession. Just like there is unity of title, there is unity of possession. So there is no word of severance. That is most dangerous. Why? Because of what we call right of survivorship. So now, if one is buying, that a function of which one are you buying from? Is it co-ownership in terms of tenancy in common or co-ownership in terms of joint tenancy? If it is a co-ownership in terms of tenancy in common, for example, the tenant in tenancy in common can sell his own portion. But where it is the one that is so common and ignorantly common, people don't know when they enter into it, they don't know the implication, is the case of joint tenancy. Where, like the example you gave, husband and wife will come together, acquire a property, and the two of them become registered proprietor under one title. No word of severance. So it's a joint tenancy. With that joint tenancy, buying such a property requires quite a lot of exercising precautions.
Okay.
So that is giving background to what co-ownership is.
Okay.
Now, if it is under joint tenancy, the right of survivorship is automatic. It's part of their holdings.
Okay.
Yes. So now, if one is to buy where there is co-ownership, the first thing is that one, the co-owner must agree to sell.
Okay.
If they want to sell.
Okay.
Two, agree to sell could be in terms of maybe express consent, written consent. However, it's not enough for them to just agree to sell. The two of them must be ready to execute the deed of transfer, which is deed of assignment.
Okay.
If one is to execute a deed of assignment, it will not be effective to transfer that right to the buyer.
Okay.
So where a buyer is buying, for example, let's say the two of them are not together. One is abroad, one is here.
Okay.
Right? And buyer is buying here. One, to initiate the transaction, the one abroad could grant express consent for the transaction to work. He could equally agree to where the payment will be made, designated account, expressly in writing. But that kind of letter will not suffice in place of his signature on the deed of transfer, which is like deed of assignment or deed of service. Both of them must sign that. If both do not sign, that deed will not be able to effectively transfer that title to the buyer. Now, the issue there is that, for example, this kind of situation can occur in many ways. It could be because they buy directly. It could be because through under will, somebody has bequeathed property to 2, 3, or 4 of them together as a joint tenant. So where that happens, one of them cannot single-handedly sell, even if they are just two. And what selling means is the deed effecting that transfer of interest must be executed by the two of them. I have, out of experience, we have encountered so many of this kind of situation, and it happens. Erroneously, buyer buy, erroneously, without being informed appropriately, that the two must sign. Even if they are four of them must sign. There is no way one can delegate that signing authority to the other one. No. Now, in one of the GRAs in Lagos, for confidentiality, let's leave it that way, I was to buy a property for a client. Okay. And we realized that the man that bought actually bought from joint tenants. 4 of them, their father bequeathed the assets to them as joint tenants through will. Okay. And funny enough, when I think two of them were abroad, 2 here. But by the time the sales was to be done, the people abroad only signed letter agreeing to the sales. When the deed was to be executed, it's only 1 out of even the 2 here that executed the deed. So as at the time they were to sell the property, when we were to buy, we looked at all this and we realized that there was really a gap, because for about 15 years before that time, the man could not obtain governor's consent on that property. So, and we noticed attempt was made. They had to now look into it. We realized that it's only one out of the 4 that executed the deed. That will not have effective transfer of rights that have been created in respect of that holding. So the 4 of them probably must sign. So what my emphasis here to buyer and listeners out there, that when you are buying, such that the property is under co-ownership, the 2, 3, 4, the number of owners must sign,
Okay.
particularly the deed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned under that co-ownership, under joint tenants, I mean, you mentioned something very important about the number of people coming together to purchase property. So now, given that, I know that some of our viewers might have a question that, okay, so does that mean that their names will compulsorily be on the maybe purchase receipt or on the document generally that
The names of the
buyer,
owners.
yes, the co-owners, yes.
The co-owners, they are the seller.
Okay.
If you have Olalekan Aboderin and Femi Sanusi as co-owner,
Okay.
and we are to sell to this academy, for example, as buyer, the deed will be prepared between us, the two of us, as I know,
Okay.
right? And this academy as I need.
Okay.
So, what are our names?
Okay.
Like, for example, even in procuring CFO, you know that our picture, the two of us, will be on the CFO.
Okay. Okay.
Our names will be there.
Okay.
Even if it's husband and wife,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
And good. If it's a deed, now we are signing to this academy, for example, our name will be the assignor. In the signature parts, that is the endorsement column, will be the one to equally sign.
Okay.
That means we have properly executed the deed.
Okay.
Otherwise, you cannot sign on behalf of the two of us, and I cannot sign on behalf of the two of us.
Okay.
So you will sign, I will sign. And even if it's his husband and wife.
Okay.
And I need to warn, when it's the case of husband and wife, it's more often people always say if the husband has signed, that's suffices. That's if that house at all is in the olden days, not now. So both husband and wife must sign. Their two names must appear on the deed, and both of them must sign. Very important. So I don't know if I've answered that question. So they must sign. The two names will be there as I know, and both of them must execute.
Yeah. So I want to say that. So does that mean that, or should I say, aside purchase, joint acquisition, is there any other way that joint ownership can be created?
Yes, through gift.
Okay. For
For example, I choose to give out my property interlife to 2, 3, 4. Maybe I have 3 other people I'm so pleased with, and I feel I want to give them my property, and I give it to them. You can give it to them blindly or unknowingly as joint tenants. Through gift, yes. Through inheritance. I mentioned that earlier. Through inheritance. You know, passing the property through will to 2, 3 of your children.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
It becomes joint tenants where there is no word of severance in terms of proportions or portions that each one of them will have. Like, let me give you an example. That's a very good question. Let me give you an example on that inheritance. If a will, for example, says blue acres to Mr. A, B, and C.
Okay.
If the will introduces that the way to be sharing rents to be collected on that property, that is an indication of word of severance.
Okay.
It does not mean that the property, the will says to be held in equal proportion. If it says to be held in equal proportion, is a word of severance. Okay. That means they are to share the asset in equal proportion if they want to share. So that will not be joint tenancy, it will be tenancy in common. Okay. Again, if it says the blue acres was developed to be held or for Mr. A, B, and C, the proceed and to be held and run for so years, the proceed to be shared in so proportion. That proportion is a clue, it's a word of severance. It's a clue to how they can share, just like they will know how to share the proceed, they can use that to equally determine proportions or proportions for each one of them. Okay. But it will be a joint tenancy where no indication of word of severance. Okay. Because in that case, all the tenant hold jointly as one single entity. Okay. Yeah.
All right. So following from that, I have another question, which is part of what you mentioned about right of survivorship. That's a big word for some of our viewers, so I just wanted to explain.
Right of survivorship.
Yes, sir.
That is a right that goes with joint tenancy.
Okay.
And what right of survivorship means is this. Number one, if the co-ownership has been established, it must first of all be established that truly it takes the form of joint tenancy.
Okay.
If it's now established that it takes the form of joint tenancy, then the next thing is that right of survivorship goes with it. What right of survivorship means is that the surviving tenants, the surviving co-owners,
Okay.
holds the holding as if the one that died had never been part of that thing.
Okay.
For analysis, let's say you have A, B, C, and D as joint tenants, co-owners. If C died, A, B, and D are the surviving ones. They will be the owner of their holding, the holding that the four of them had before. The three remaining standing will be the one that will hold the asset as if C that died had never been part of them.
Okay.
So until what that means invariably is that if they start dying, it's the final surviving one that will have that right because of that right of survivorship, as if the others have never existed.
Okay.
So the implication is, for example, it's not an asset that you can easily bequeath. Let's say C that died first.
Okay.
His children now come to say, our father was part of this ownership. Right? So it's an issue to contend with in law courts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So survivorship there, and it's very, very sensitive. And based on that right of survivorship, actually, I wonder, because where is a joint tenancy, like husband and wife, for example, and one of them dies, one will expect that by virtue of right of survivorship, the one that is still existing assumes the full ownership. Right? It then means that asking for letter of administration for the one that died will ordinarily supposed not to come up.
Okay. And
we have that happening in Lagos. Maybe in one of our episodes we need to really look into that aspect. We have that happening in Lagos, whereas within the purview of law, the one that is left, that has not died, has the right of that survivorship.
Okay.
So it assumes that ownership. So where then is the place of letter of administration for the one that died? I think it's a very big question to ask.
Okay. So, I mean, we know that death is inevitable, and at some point, so everybody is going to leave this world. Now, using the husband and wife as an example, what happens when, and it's a case of joint ownership, when either of the party dies and you want to buy? Because you mentioned something about both of them must sign for the deed of transfer. So what happens when one of the parties is dead?
Okay, thank you. Ordinarily, within the context of law, the moment is a joint tenancy, let's say husband and wife, that equally takes I attract a technical name, but what it means is joint tenancy. I can't recall that name now. Husband and wife, they hold title under joint tenancy. One man dies. Right of survivorship is there.
Okay. The
moment one dies, let's say it's the husband that dies, the wife remains the one standing.
Okay.
And hence reserve the right of survivorship. And hence reserve the right to deal on the property.
Okay.
Her signature as at that time will survive. However, I am aware that in land services in Lagos, when such thing happens, government still demand for letter of administration in respect of the husband that have died or in respect of the wife that have died. That is part of what I said, is there is a big question there to be answered. Because to me, it's like encroaching on the right of that survivorship that the surviving tenant has. Because ordinarily, by virtue of that provision, the moment one tenant dies, the others have right of survivorship and the surviving immediately. And they hold the asset as if the right of the one that died had never existed. So if husband and wife has assets and one dies, then that right of survivorship is still there. and it should not be extinguished. So there is need for us to know why the need to request for letter of administration in that case. But in the literary interpretation of what happens, I mean, the position of joint tenancy, position of law regarding the right of survivorship, the one that is still surviving has that right of survivorship.
All right. Thank you very much. Right. So I don't know if you have any final words before we draw the curtain on today's episode. Based on all that we've discussed today.
You see, the point is this. All these are scenarios that we face, situations out there.
Yeah, that's correct.
And what we are saying in essence is that buyers must be wary. Knowing when you must ensure that the 2 or 3 or the co-owners must sign. Okay. Knowing when signature of one might survive. Okay. And be well guided, consult professionals, ask estate surveyors, ask lawyers to guide you when you are doing such a transaction. And I want to emphasize, particularly when it's a transaction intervention, the 2 or the co-owners are still alive, and buyer wants to buy, it's very, very important to ensure that all the co-owners must execute the deed of transfer, either in form of deed of assignment or in form of deed of summons.
Okay, all right. Thank you, sir. Viewers, please remember to follow us on our social media handles. It is displayed at the bottom of the screen. And also, please, we would like to hear from you. Send us your feedbacks, questions, and suggestions. Until next time, stay blessed.